Hello and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today no matter what it is you're doing. For the free wire tutorial here on YouTube today, I'd like to share with you my rainbow bar connector. Now this can be used as a drop pendant by itself, it can be used to create a chain bar pendant or even across the back of the wrist as a bracelet, even turned into a brooch. So let's get down to the board and have a look at what we're going to create, and I'll then show you how to make it. So here's the rainbow bar connector. Now it can simply be attached into a piece of chain. Obviously you would want to have a closure at the back, or do as I do, take a single length of chain and put hoops or hooks on either end so that you can change out the main bar component and keep the same piece of chain. So that's one idea of how you can use this. You can simply thread it onto chain or even a lariat design and have that hang down as a drop pendant. That's the wrong way up, that's much better. Or you can pop that across the back of the wrist, connect it with two pieces of chain or even some heavier wire to create a bracelet or a bangle. Or you can indeed flip to the back of the design and attach on a brooch connector, a brooch component. So it's a multi-purpose connector. I've used two different sets of rainbow shaded beads, or chakra beads if you prefer. The larger set are 6mm with a 1mm drill hole through the centre. The smaller set are 3mm beads. It's a very, very simple process to work up, and I'm going to take you through that now. So I pop that up into the corner, I'll just get the chain out of the way and we'll look at how we connect that in later. So to begin with, I have a length of 18 gauge or 1mm wire, and this is approximately 7 inches in length. What I'm going to do is get that nice and warm to begin with, and I'll start by putting a very gentle arc into that wire around the central area. Now you can use anything you have around the home to create that arcing form. Could be a tin can or a bottle or something similar. I'm just going to put a delicate arc down at that centrepiece. Now because I super warmed that wire, I can open that out or close that up however I desire. What we're going to do is start with our smaller set of those rainbow beads. You don't have to have 7 beads, it just looks really nice if you do. And I've chosen to use the chakra colours or the rainbow colours. These are 3mm approximately beads, and as I say, I have 7 of them. We're going to add in some finer gauge wire now to add all of this section together. I've got around about 15 inches of my 0.4mm, which is equivalent to 26 gauge. And I'm going to start by wrapping from around about an inch from the end, just about a third of the way along the wire. I'm going to lay the finer gauge wire over the top of that arcing section, around about an inch of it, and just start to draw that round as neatly and tightly as I can. Now you may prefer to use a set of pliers to help you do this. I'm going to whiz through that quite quickly. You can slow that down and get it a bit neater. Now when you get towards the end of that wire, you might not particularly want that sticking into your thumb, so you can use your pliers just to finish that off. Get that end bit stuck down nice and neatly against the heavier wire, and then tighten those coils up together. Another way you can tighten the coils together is to put one side of your pliers on the upper side as we're looking to the right, and the other side of your pliers on the lower side to the left. So you're diagonally going across that spring-like form, just drawing that together to make it neat and tidy. Focusing really on that end to make sure it's smooth. And then we want the wire to be coming onto the outside of that arcing shape. So I'm going to start by taking my 3mm garnet and adding that onto the other end of the finer gauge wire. Now I've got a little crinkle on this one, so I'm going to try and be thrifty and use as much of the wire as possible. If it doesn't go on, we will simply trim it away or straighten it out. Now if I straighten it out, it's not going to be much use at the end of it, but it will make quite a nice needle for either threading beads on or stabbing myself in the hand, so whichever way you want to do that. Let's bring that bead down against the outside arc that we've created. I'm going to estimate that I'm going to put the 7 beads along like so, so I might just take it slightly further up. You can see the size of the beads, how much space they're going to take on the arc. Now you can make this slightly smaller for the back of the wrist if you want to by reducing the number of coils around the wire after each bead. So I've started with around about an inch of wire here, which has given me in the region of 7 to 10 wraps. If I hold the bead against the arc of wire that we've started with, now because my finer gauge wire came from underneath, I'm going to pinch the bead into position and then draw the long tail of wire over the top, pulling that neatly back on itself to get some tension to hold that bead against the outer arc of wire. Now I'm going to go for 3 wraps between each bead on the demonstration piece. The piece I created earlier, there are 7 wraps between. Now the reason I've put 7 wraps is because we're working with 0.4 or 26 gauge wire, and they will generate a nice little spring-like form to sit each bead opposite its matching larger bead brother. So you can decide how much space you want to have between each of those smaller beads. If you don't want to spend your whole day winding wire around, you can simply open that gap out a little bit by drawing the coil along with your nail. So again, my finer gauge wire has ended up coming away from that arc underneath. So if I pop that down, I'm going to find the next bead now. So I have a little orange agate that I'm going to use for this piece. Find the end of that wire. We try not to warm the finer gauge wire too much because it can get brittle before you want it to be done with its job. So again, I'm going to pinch that bead so that it sits neatly against the outside arc of my wire. Pinch the bead into position, take the tail of the wire, it's come from underneath, therefore it has to travel over the top. Bring that neatly all the way around. So I've put a little bit of tension in that to get it to sit neatly against the arc. I'm just going to open that out slightly, and then I'm going to wrap a second and a third time. Now you can see that I've slightly altered the shape of the arc. I'm not going to worry about it because I warmed that wire. It's still got a little flexibility in it. You can just ooch and scooch those along if you need to. We want the entirety of those 7 beads to sit on the central piece of this arch wire. So I'm going to show you with one more bead and then we will speed through the rest and I'll meet you at the other end. So I've got now a yellow bead. This is a little citrine. Let's allow that to zip line down and sit against that arc of wire. And again, I'm just going to open up that section ever so slightly. And what I'm doing is I'm drawing that coil of 3 wires away from the bead slightly. So I've got more of an open weave. I'm going to again sit the bead firmly against that wire. Pull the wire over the top. The finer gauge wire goes over the top and round 3 times. So what I'm going to do is do the rest of these beads, bring those remaining 4 beads into position and try to get them to sit centrally on the arc, and I'll meet you on the other side. By repeating the same technique a number of times, I've now got a lovely U-shaped piece of 1mm or 18 gauge wire with those 7 beads wrapped on. And at the far end, I simply finished off by wrapping around the heavier gauge wire, trimming and neatening down the end of the fine wire. So I'll show you that on the board now and we can get cracking with the next step. So what we have is this lovely U-shape ready to work with. I'm going to put that over to one side now and bring in my second set of beads. Let's just pop that up in the corner for now. The second set of beads are 7 in the rainbow or chakra colours, and these are approximately 6mm beads. The key part is that they have a large drill hole for their size. It's at least a 1mm drill hole. We have again around about 7 inches of that 1mm or 18 gauge wire. And I'm just going to warm that through so that it is receptive to being bent and wrangled. So let's give that a lovely warm through. Makes it nice and straight and shiny and much softer to work with. So to make my life easier, what I'm going to do is put a bend around about 1.5 inches from one end. And I'm just going to create a round shape in that little tail end of wire at one end. I'm not going to close it up yet because I will show you that later. But I'm going to take the circular form of my round nose pliers and create a loop shape on the end, or a circular form, and we're just going to ignore that for now. What I tend to do is just give that a quick strengthen so I don't accidentally knock it out of shape. And then I'm going to ensure that the other section of wire is nice and straight. What I will do is just adjust this kink on the end here, getting close to the end of one of my kilogram reels of raw copper wire. So just going to give that a nice little straighten up. Now I have slightly hardened it, but I'm not overly going to worry. So I need to add my beads on now. I don't know what mnemonic device you use to remember the rainbow order, but for me it was always red for Richard, O for orange, or of, the word of, so Richard of, and then yellow is York, so Richard of York. If I can find the hole, that would be super. And then G for gave, Richard of York gave, and then we've got B, blue, battle, I, indigo, in, and then V, violet or vein. So for me, my mnemonic device, and I will always use this, is Richard of York gave battle in vain. There are very many other ways that you can remember the rainbow colour or chakra order, but that's my one. So let's get that tray back out of the way and crack on with the next bit. So in order to stop these from coming away, that little bit of wire that I straightened on the end and have over strengthened, I'm just going to put a small loop on the end. I will be cutting this away later, but it's just to stop my beads from sliding away if they decide to get a little bit feisty. So what I want to do now is bring in the little U shape that we created. Now, because we're always switching sides with our finer gauge wire when we're adding beads on in this fashion, so the finer gauge wire loops on, travels out from underneath, through the bead and over the top. You will notice when you get this up close and personal that it looks quite different in one direction. So let me flip that over. You might prefer this direction. I'm going to go with this direction. What we need to do is just match the size of that U shape up to our beads on that central core. So that actually works really, really well. What you do need to do is just be a little bit gentle. You can bring that in slightly if you need to, or open it out slightly if you need to. I think it was actually fairly close. As long as they're centralised on that arcing shape, what we're going to do now is add them to the main core wire. You do just need to make sure that you've got your beads in the same order. I think it's attention to detail that they sit side by side, but you can obviously work out how many little wraps between each bead you might want. For the piece that I made earlier, this has got 7 wraps of that finer gauge wire between each bead. So it depends if you want a cluster of wrapping or if you don't mind that slightly more open weave. This was for the essence of time, really. So we're going to make sure that we're happy with the arcing shape. Another thing that you might want to do real quick, let's just scooch those beads over to one side. Once they're on, we're going to very, very gently open and close the pliers over that central core. Scooch them back in the other direction. If you do it too hard, you'll deform the shape of the wire, so it will no longer be round. Drill holes in your beads tend to be round, so we want to have them moving freely at the moment. Now, I haven't done a huge amount of hardening, but if you give that a little flex, you'll see that there is a little extra firmness to the wire now. So we're going to move these along so that they're slightly closer to the preformed loop that I'm showing you on the left. I'm going to pop our section of U-shaped wire over the top and see how that fits. Generally speaking, I'm quite happy with how that looks. What I'm going to do is start on the right-hand side and super warm that wire. Now we need to do this without deforming the U shape that we've achieved because it fits already. But I want to get this nice and warm, and I'm going to offer the U-shaped wire over the straight core wire. I'm going to pinch the 2 pieces together, and I'm going to make sure that the wire is travelling at 90 degrees to the core, because it wants to come off at the side because we've made that lovely U shape. It tends to kind of go at a funny angle, so we want it to come up straight. And then I'm going to draw that around the core wire, and this is another reason for hardening that central core wire a little bit. And we're going to go for, I think, maybe 3, maybe 4 wraps around that core. Now what you'll notice is that my little bit of wrapping here has tapered slightly, and that's because this section of wire was harder than the section of wire that I just warmed through. So all I'm going to do is just gently compress and twist, and in the same way that we tightened up that little section of wire earlier on the end here, we're just going to get that nice and taut. You may need to draw that top section of wire back again. So once we're happy that that is sitting nicely in position, we're going to flip it upside down and make sure that we've got equal and opposite spacing on the far side. I've just slightly kinked the wire here. I'm not going to worry about it because I will be covering that up in a hot minute anyway. So get all of those 7 larger beads in the centre. Equalise your spacing of beads on the rainbow shaped section and then pinch that into position, not forgetting to draw the long tail of wire down and away at 90 degrees to that core wire. Again, pinch that in position and give that a little bit of heat first. And then draw that around that pre-strengthened core. Now I'm going to just elevate that slightly and make sure that I get the same number of wraps. So I think I need to do one more before I get in there with my pliers and tighten that up a little bit. Over the top and round, and then protecting my bead with my nail, I'm just going to tighten those wraps up and across the strand as well. Back in the other direction again, you might need to play around again, protect your beads and squish that until it sits neatly. So we can worry about the mobility when we start adding some decals on either end of the design. So I'm going to now put a round form on the other side. What I need to think about at this stage is, do I want to put coils on my design or not? You can take the section of wire that coils around to the rear of your design, whichever side you decide is the rear, and you can simply trim away with your flush cutters and squish that down against the core, or you can add coils. So what I might do is use the rainbow shaped, the arcing wire, to create a coil on one side, and then use the wire that I have coming away from the loops on either side to create a coil on the other side, and in that way I'll have a double-sided pendant or necklace bar connector or bracelet bar connector, whatever you choose to do with it. So I've simply created a loop on the second side of that central core wire, and what we're going to do now is bring the whole thing together, and I'll show you how to add in some chain loops if you want to do that, or you can very simply thread one of those loops onto a chain and wear it as a drop pendant by itself. Let's get back down to the board and we'll get into the final stage of today's tutorial. So you can see that I've got a loop on either end, just a round loop with a tail coming away, and what I've done is taken a second to just trim each of these 4 sticky outy tail wires to approximately the same length. All that means is when I start creating some circles, they'll be of a similar size. So you have the option to tie these loops directly into a chain. I've got a stunt chain here ready with a magnetic clasp up at the top, and some large loops down at the bottom. So I'm going to make this as a bar necklace again, but you could simply use a smaller piece of chain directly into the loops. So I'm going to do that second. The first thing I want to do is create some spirals on the ends of the rainbow shaped wire. What you'll see is this still is a little bit fluid. We're going to sort that out in a second. Once we're happy that that is absolutely centralised on the bar, you can give that one last little squish, and that should tighten it up. You do need to protect those beads. So that has now made that steady and stable. So I'm going to show you on one end, very, very simple way to create a coil. Grab the very end of that section of wire, start rotating it around your round nose pliers. Once you've got that circular form going, let's just move that out of the way. What we're going to do is tighten this one up. It's a little bit like an E instead of a loop at the moment. So let's push that into the forefinger on my non-dominant hand and continue turning that circular form around all the way up to the top, like so. We'll do the same on the other end, and then we will need to tie in to the chain or whatever it is we're using. So let's say we're going to use a chain. This is representing the link of my chain. I'm going to slide that inside the loop shape that we made at the end there. Made that a little bit tight. If you can't get that in, just open it out slightly until it slides in. Push that back closed by hand. And then what we're going to do is grip hold of the circular form without squashing the link of your chain or the core wire. and then bring that tail over and around. Things are still mobile, which is really good because it enables me to show you how the process works. So I've just gone for 2 small circulars on that one. And I now need to make an exact, in the same way rather, the exact same process. I'm going to make a small coil to sit over the end section. So we don't have a huge amount left, which is absolutely fine because we only want a small loop. Get those round nose pliers in close to the end of the wire, close to the end of the pliers. Start creating that circular form. And then we're going to push that into the non-dominant hand, rotating with the dominant hand until the loop or the coil sits against the project. Now you can see that those are both sticking up at the moment. So what I'm going to do is ensure that I'm happy with the placement of my piece. That looks pretty good to me. And I'm going to draw one coil down on one side, like so. And then flip it over, draw the coil down on the other side. So it can go towards the central bar or away from the central bar, however you want that to sit. And you can very, very, very gently just squish those together and it will stop that section from rotating overly. You'd simply repeat at the other end, making sure that you're happy with placement, and you should end up with something very similar to this. Thanks for hanging out and making jewellery with me today. I will be back again next week with more beginner accessible jewellery ideas in wire. My name is Gem Hawks. This is the project that we've created together today. I hope you like it as much as I do. I do love a little bit of rainbow colouring on jewellery pieces. Have a gorgeous day and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.